High above the winding cobbled paths of the ancient forest village, nestled safely under a sweeping roof of mossy clay tiles, lay Barnaby's cozy loft. Barnaby, a gentle red-furred creature with soft cream markings, round ears, and polished wire-rimmed spectacles perched on his snout, adjusted his warm, green knitted wool scarf against the creeping evening chill. The sun had long since dipped below the dark forested hills, leaving behind a deep twilight sky of indigo and violet. Through the arched window, the scent of dry pine needles and cool, damp earth floated into the room, whispering of the approaching weather and the comfort of shelter. The first raindrop fell with a tiny, musical tap against the glass pane, followed quickly by another on the copper weather vane outside. Barnaby paused, lifting his head from a bundle of dried garden herbs to listen to the soft, rhythmic patter beginning to form. It was a gentle rain, the kind that promised to linger through the night and wash away the dust of the warm summer days. He smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of contentment settle in his chest as the tiled rooftop began to sing its quiet, watery song to the forest. He walked over to the stone hearth, where the last embers of the afternoon fire were glowing like sleepy amber eyes in the dark. Kneeling on a soft, braided rug, Barnaby carefully laid a few split logs of seasoned oak onto the iron grate, blowing gently until a bright, golden flame leapt up to embrace the wood. The fireplace hummed with a low, comforting crackle, casting long, dancing shadows across the wooden rafters and warming the chilly air. The smell of sweet wood smoke mingled with the aroma of dried lavender hanging from the ceiling. Barnaby reached for his favorite copper kettle, its surface polished to a warm, reflective glow that mirrored the flickering firelight. He filled it with fresh, cold water from the earthenware jar in the corner, the liquid splashing coolly against the clean metal. Placing the kettle on the iron trivet over the hearth, he listened as the water began to whisper, warming slowly. This was the start of his evening ritual, a quiet transition from the busy, active work of the day to the tranquil, undisturbed stillness of the night. While the kettle heated, Barnaby stood before his rustic herbal cabinet, where dozens of small glass jars were arranged in neat, labeled rows. He selected 3 jars, dried chamomile blossoms, purple elderberry skins, and sweet silver-leaf fern. He measured a generous pinch of each into a ceramic teapot, admiring the delicate colors and the faint, comforting fragrance that drifted up. The herbs had been gathered from the valley meadow during the spring, dried under the hot sun, and saved specifically for nights when the rain fell soft and steady. The kettle began to whistle, a soft and gentle steam escaping from its narrow spout in a curling, white plume. Barnaby wrapped a thick woolen potholder around the warm handle and carefully poured the hot water over the dry herbs. The steam rose in a fragrant cloud, filling the loft with the sweet scent of wild meadows and damp forest soil. He placed the lid on the teapot, letting the blend steep while the rain outside grew slightly louder, drumming a steady, soothing rhythm against the clay tiles. The rain was fully established now, a steady downpour that enveloped the ancient forest and the village in a soft, gray shroud. Each drop met the sloping roof tiles with a gentle thud, creating a complex, layered symphony that echoed through the high ceiling of the loft. The sound was consistent, a comforting white noise that seemed to push the worries of the outer world far into the background. Barnaby stood by the window, watching the tiny rivers of water trace winding paths down the dark glass. Looking out, the village below was peaceful and quiet, the cobblestone streets shining like wet slate under the distant, warm glow of the iron street lamps. Smoke curled sleepily from the stone chimneys of neighboring cottages, blending into the dark, rainy night. Everyone had retreated indoors, seeking the warmth of their own hearths and the comfort of their blankets. Barnaby felt a deep sense of connection to the quiet community, all of them resting beneath the same gentle, rain-filled sky that watered the sleeping valley. The wet leaves of the elderberry bushes along the lane shivered under the cool drops, and the soft, repetitive sound of water trickling through the stone drainage gutters of the village streets created a gentle, watery backdrop that echoed the calm of the night. Just outside the window, a set of brass wind chimes hung from the eaves, swaying gently in the cool breeze. They chimed softly, their metallic notes ringing out like distant bells in the night, perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the rain. The sound was sparse and light, adding a delicate melody to the low drone of the water. Barnaby adjusted his green scarf, feeling the contrast between the cool draft near the window and the warm, dry air of the cozy loft. He returned to the hearth, where the tea had finished steeping to a deep, golden amber hue. He poured the liquid into a hand-painted ceramic mug, the warmth of the clay immediately heating his paws. Carrying the steaming mug, he walked over to his favorite armchair, a plush, high-backed seat covered in a soft patchwork quilt. He sank into the cushions, letting out a long, slow sigh of relief as the remaining tension of the day melted away into the quiet, cozy room. Barnaby took a slow sip of the hot tea, tasting the sweet earthiness of the chamomile and the subtle, fruity tartness of the elderberry. It warmed him from the inside out, spreading a gentle, relaxing heat through his chest and down to his toes. The tea was a familiar comfort, a brew that always brought peace and a sense of stillness. He cradled the mug in both paws, watching the steam curl and drift toward the wooden beams above, disappearing into the dark shadows. On the wooden mantelpiece, a grandfather clock ticked with a slow, deliberate cadence, its brass pendulum swinging back and forth in the shadow. The tick-tock was a steady heartbeat for the loft, measuring the passing hours in a calm, unhurried manner. It seemed to say that there was no need to rush, no tasks left to complete, and that the only requirement was to sit and listen. The clock's rhythm blended seamlessly with the rain, creating a double-layered lullaby that filled the space. The clock's quiet presence was like a guardian of the late hour, marking time not as a deadline, but as a slow, rolling wave of peaceful seconds that carried him closer to dreamland, step by quiet step. The walls of the loft were lined with tall oak bookcases, their shelves packed with ancient volumes, maps of the surrounding woods, and hand-bound journals of botanical drawings. The books had worn leather spines and yellowed pages, smelling of old paper and sweet vanilla. Barnaby loved his library, a collection of knowledge gathered over many years of exploring the forests and meadows of the valley. Each book represented a quiet memory, a piece of the world preserved in ink and paper for winter nights. On long winter nights and rainy evenings like this, these books were his companions, offering worlds of quiet exploration and peaceful thoughts that matched the slow rhythm of the weather. Setting his mug down on a small wooden side table, Barnaby browsed the shelves, his fingers tracing the textured spines. He selected an old book of folklore, its green leather cover faded to a soft sage, with gold lettering that had grown dim with age. He brought the book back to his chair, carefully opening the cover to reveal the beautiful, hand-drawn illustrations of ancient trees and starry skies inside. The thick paper made a soft, satisfying rustle as he turned the pages. He lit a beeswax candle on the side table, the small flame flickering gently before settling into a warm, steady glow. The candlelight cast a soft, golden circle over the pages of the book, illuminating the elegant script and the intricate drawings. Barnaby read slowly, letting the old stories of friendly forest spirits and magical, quiet glades wash over his mind. The tales were gentle, filled with a simple magic that felt very real on a dark, rainy night like this one. The rain changed its tune slightly, the drops becoming larger and softer, a gentle hum that felt like a whisper. It was the sound of a midnight rain, steady and unbroken, falling upon the thick canopy of the oak forest surrounding the village. The leaves of the ancient trees caught the water, letting it drip slowly down to the mossy forest floor. Barnaby could imagine the woodland creatures curled up in their cozy burrows, dry and warm, listening to the same soothing sound. He closed the book for a moment, letting his eyes rest, and looked at a large hand-drawn map pinned to the wall. The map showed the valleys, streams, and hidden paths of the valley, each landmark named in his own neat handwriting. He remembered the sunny afternoon he had mapped the Whispering Brook, the water cool against his paws as he searched for rare water mint. Now, under the rain, that same brook would be swelling, its waters rushing happily through the smooth stones. Barnaby decided to spend a little time organizing his workspace, a large oak desk covered in bundles of dried flowers and notebooks. He moved slowly, picked up a bunch of dried blue cornflowers, and carefully stripped the petals into a small glass jar. The dried petals made a soft, papery whisper as they fell. This work did not require much active thought, allowing his mind to remain calm and drift with the sound of the rain on the tiles above. He worked by feel and smell, the scent of the cornflowers rising to meet him like a memory of summer skies, a quiet contrast to the dark, wet night that pressed against the windowpane. Each herb on the desk had its own unique fragrance and purpose in his practice. Lavender was for peaceful sleep, mint for clarity, thyme for strength, and rosemary for remembrance. Barnaby handled each bundle with care, appreciating the simple beauty of these dried plants. They were a reminder of the sunny days of summer, preserved to bring comfort and healing during the colder, rainier seasons of the year. He sealed the jars, their glass surfaces reflecting the soft, warm firelight. The glass jars clicked softly against each other as he arranged them on the shelf, a small, domestic sound that was quickly swallowed by the larger, all-enveloping sound of the downpour outside. The scent of the rain, known as Petrichor, grew stronger in the loft, a clean and earthy perfume that rose from the wet gardens below. It was a fragrance that Barnaby loved, signifying life, growth, and the renewal of the earth. He walked back to the window, leaning his paws on the wooden sill. The cool air brushed against his fur, carrying the fresh scent deep into his lungs. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the rain, which nourished the forest he called home. As he stood by the window, a movement in the darkness caught his eye. A tiny blue forest bird was huddled on the outer ledge, its feathers wet and ruffled from the storm. The little creature looked up at Barnaby with wide, dark eyes, shivering slightly in the cool wind. Barnaby's heart warmed with sympathy for the cold bird. He slowly opened the window just enough for the bird to hop inside, out of the wind and rain, welcoming it into the warmth. It was a moment of quiet connection, a small hand extended to a creature of the wild, bringing them both together under the sheltering roof while the sky poured down its rain. The bird hopped onto the dry wooden sill, shaking its feathers and chirping a tiny, quiet note of thanks. Barnaby spoke in a soft, soothing whisper, reassuring the little visitor that it was safe. Barnaby fetched a small wicker basket from the corner, lining it with a clean piece of soft green wool flannel. He placed the basket near the hearth, where the warmth of the fire would reach it without being too hot. The little bird, having finished its meal, hopped across the floor and fluttered into the basket. It nestled down into the soft wool, blinking sleepily as the warmth of the fire began to dry its feathers. Within moments, the bird was asleep, safe. Barnaby smiled gently, happy to have provided a safe haven for the little creature. He sat back down in his armchair, wrapping his own patchwork quilt more tightly around his shoulders. The rain continued its steady, rhythmic drumming on the rooftop, an endless lullaby for the sleeping bird and the quiet loft. The firelight flickered, throwing soft, golden hues onto the walls and creating a cocoon of absolute safety and comfort in the heart of the storm. The room was filled with the soft, comforting sights of a home well loved, each corner holding a memory of peace and quiet reflection, safe from the damp wind outside. The oak logs in the fireplace had burned down, leaving a bed of glowing red embers that pulsed with a deep, inner light. The heat they radiated was steady and mild, warming the loft to a perfect, comfortable temperature. Barnaby watched the embers, fascinated by the shifting patterns of light and shadow on the walls. He took another sip of his tea, which was now pleasantly warm, the sweet flavors lingering on his palate and soothing his throat. The red glow was like a miniature sunset captured in stone, a slow and fading light that signaled the natural end of the day and the beginning of the quiet night's rest. He closed his eyes, letting his senses tune entirely to the sound of the rain. He could distinguish the sharp, clear ring of water hitting the copper pipes, the softer thud against the clay tiles, and the gentle rustle as it ran off the roof and trickled into the wooden water barrels below. The water created a continuous, flowing rhythm, a song of the earth that had no beginning and no end. It was incredibly peaceful, clearing his mind of all thoughts. The grandfather clock chimed the midnight hour, its low, resonant bell ringing 12 times. The sound was soft and deep, echoing gently through the loft before fading into the steady roar of the rain. Barnaby opened his eyes and looked at the clock, realizing how late it had become. The night was at its deepest point, the time when the rest of the world was fast asleep, and only the rain remained awake to watch over the dark valley. The echo of the chimes lingered in the high rafters of the loft, a gentle reminder that the day was fully done and the quiet hours of rest had arrived, peaceful and uninterrupted. Barnaby reached for a blank journal on the table, opening it to a fresh, clean page. He took his quill pen, dipped it in dark ink. He wrote about how peace is not the absence of sound, but the presence of a gentle rhythm that aligns with the heart. The rain was that rhythm tonight, a reminder that nature has its own way of resting and restoring itself. Barnaby finished writing, letting the ink dry before closing the book. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, having captured a small piece of this quiet night to look back on during the busier days of summer. The journal would hold this memory, a small record of a rainy night when a red-furred creature and a tiny blue bird found shelter together under a tiled roof. He stood up quietly, careful not to make any noise, and walked over to the wicker basket by the hearth. The tiny blue bird was fast asleep, curled into a perfect ball of soft feathers, its head tucked beneath its wing. It was breathing slowly and evenly, completely safe from the storm outside. Barnaby felt a quiet joy in knowing that, for this one night, he could offer shelter and warmth to a creature of the wild. Barnaby smiled, adjusting his glasses to get a clearer view of his tiny guest, feeling a deep sense of peace in the quiet trust the bird had placed in him. Through the window, the rain seemed to soften slightly, turning into a fine, misty drizzle that blanketed the forest in a quiet haze. The sound changed from a drumbeat to a soft, continuous hiss, like the rustling of silk sheets. The leaves of the ancient oak tree outside shimmered with water, their branches drooping gracefully under the weight of the moisture. The world was being washed clean, prepared for the morning that would eventually come after the storm. The mist curled around the branches of the trees, softening their outlines and turning the forest into a mysterious, beautiful world of shadows and water, resting under the sky. Barnaby walked back to the glass window, breathing out a soft breath that fogged a small patch of the pane. He used his paw to draw a simple, smiling face in the condensation, watching it slowly fade as the glass cooled. The water droplets outside ran down the glass, wiping the drawing away and replacing it with clean, clear paths. He watched the process, finding a quiet beauty in the impermanence of the moment. The water outside was a steady stream of life, washing away the old and preparing the earth for a new day, while Barnaby watched in quiet contemplation from his warm corner. The wind had died down completely, leaving the air still and quiet. The wind chimes on the balcony were silent now, their metal rods hanging straight and still in the wet air. The only sound left was the rain itself, a steady, unwavering hum that filled the silence of the night. Barnaby liked this stillness, a moment where the earth seemed to hold its breath, resting in the cool, dark embrace of the storm. In this deep quiet, the sound of his own breath and the ticking of the clock became soft partners to the rain, creating a rhythmic circle of peace that filled the loft. He picked up his journal and placed it back on the shelf, sliding it between two older volumes. The bookshelf felt like a vault of quiet moments, each book holding a different day, a different season, a different thought. He knew that tomorrow he would return to his work, helping the villagers with their ailments and studying the plants of the forest, but tonight was purely for rest and reflection under the rain. The books stood in silent rows, guardians of stories and secrets, waiting for the sun to rise, but for now, they rested in the dark, rainy night, peaceful and still. The embers in the hearth were growing dim, the bright orange light fading into a soft, dusty gray. The warmth remained, however, radiating from the thick stones of the fireplace and keeping the loft cozy. Barnaby did not add any more wood, knowing that the warmth would last through the night. The fading light was a signal that it was time to prepare for his own sleep, following the lead of the bird. The darkness of the loft was not cold, but rather a warm, protective sleeve that wrapped around the room, inviting sleep to take hold of all its occupants, one by one. He walked over to the side table and gently blew out the beeswax candle. The flame flickered and went out, leaving a thin trail of sweet-smelling smoke that curled into the darkness. The loft was now lit only by the faint, soft glow of the remaining embers and the cool, blue light of the rainy night filtering through the window. The shadows became softer, wrapping the room in a gentle, dark blanket of peace. The soft light of the moon, hidden behind the rain clouds, cast a faint, blue glow through the window, highlighting the shapes of the furniture in a soft, dreamlike way. Barnaby walked to his sleeping alcove, a cozy nook built into the wooden wall of the loft. The bed was made of sturdy oak, piled high with a feather mattress, soft linen sheets, and a heavy patchwork quilt made of wool and cotton. He pulled back the quilt, inviting the cool, fresh air from the room to mix with the warmth of the sheets. The bed looked incredibly inviting, a sanctuary of comfort after a long day. The woolen blankets were heavy and thick, woven by the village weavers to keep out the dampest winter chill, and they smelled faintly of the clean, dry air of the loft. The sleeping alcove smelled faintly of cedar wood, which Barnaby used to keep the linens fresh and dry. He sat on the edge of the mattress, adjusting his glasses and setting them carefully on a small nightstand next to a glass of water. Without his spectacles, the world became soft and blurry, the lights from the fireplace and the window blending into gentle, glowing circles of color. It was a pleasant way to see the room, less defined. In the soft darkness, he could hear the rain tapping on the windowpane, a gentle reminder of the storm outside, which only served to make his warm bed feel even more secure. He unwrapped his cozy green knitted scarf, folding it neatly and placing it beside his glasses. The cool air touched his neck, making him eager to climb under the warm quilt. He crawled into the bed, pulling the heavy blankets up to his chin. The feather mattress sank beneath him, supporting his body in a soft, cloud-like embrace. He let out a deep, contented breath, his muscles relaxing completely as he settled in. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting his head sink into the soft pillow, feeling the cool air on his face while his body was wrapped in absolute warmth. Under the heavy quilt, Barnaby felt completely insulated from the cold, rainy world outside. The warmth of the blankets was immediate, creating a private haven of comfort. He could hear the rain on the tiles directly above his head, only a few feet away. The proximity of the sound made him feel even cozier, a dry and safe observer of the storm. He turned onto his side, curling his tail around his nose in content. The world outside was cold and wet, but in here, he was safe, dry, and warm, a small creature resting in his own little corner of the vast, peaceful forest. The rain seemed to pick up again, a brief flurry of larger drops hitting the tiles in a rapid, tapping sequence. It was a playful sound, like tiny paws running across the roof. Barnaby listened, letting the rhythm guide his breathing. With each tap of the rain, he inhaled the cool, fresh air of the loft, and with the silence between, he exhaled the last remnants of the day. His breath became slow and deep. The rhythm was a physical presence, a gentle vibration that seemed to lull his thoughts into a slow, rolling motion, carrying him away from the waking world, step by step. He thought of the forest outside, the tall pines and ancient oaks drinking in the water, their roots deep in the dark earth. He thought of the mossy banks of the stream, the ferns unfolding in the damp night, and the mushrooms growing silently on the forest floor. The rain was a gift to the land, bringing life and green beauty to the valley. Knowing that the forest was happy made Barnaby feel peaceful, a small part of a larger world. His thoughts began to drift, becoming fragmented and soft, like clouds moving across a night sky. He saw images of sunny meadows, the bright yellow of dandelions, and the cool blue of the forest stream. These memories blended with the sound of the rain, turning into a gentle tapestry of dreams. The boundaries of the room seemed to fade, and he felt as though he were floating on a calm, warm river. The river of his mind flowed slowly, winding through valleys of quiet dreams and peaceful forests, where the rain always fell soft and the sun was always warm. The valley itself seemed to be breathing in unison, a collective sigh of rest under the rainy canopy. In every cottage, in every burrow, and under every leaf, creatures were sleeping, safe and sound. The rain was a blanket that covered them all, a shared experience of peace and renewal. Barnaby felt a deep comfort in this shared rest, knowing that he was not alone in his quiet sanctuary, resting under the clouds. It was a quiet agreement between all living things, a surrender to the night and the rain, which washed the world clean and brought a deep, restorative rest to all. Every part of his body felt heavy and relaxed, from the tips of his ears to the end of his tail. The warmth of the bed was constant, a soothing balm that eased any remaining tension. The sound of the rain on the roof was the only thing left in his awareness, a steady, hypnotic hum that seemed to vibrate gently through the loft. It was a sound that had played for thousands of years, a timeless song. The sound was a steady anchor, holding him in a state of calm and quiet, where nothing was required of him and he could simply exist in the peaceful moment. The last embers in the hearth finally went out, leaving the room in complete, dark stillness. The loft was cool and fresh, but under the quilt, Barnaby was perfectly warm. The darkness was soft and friendly, a quiet space where he could fully let go of the waking world. He closed his eyes, his eyelashes brushing against the soft linen of the pillow, ready to surrender to sleep, listening to the rain. The soft breathing of the tiny bird in its basket was the only other sound, a gentle counterpoint to the rain, showing that all was well in the quiet loft. He let himself sink deeper into the mattress, his consciousness slipping away like water flowing through smooth stones. The rain on the rooftop continued its faithful song, a steady guardian of his sleep. It would keep watch through the night, watering the gardens and the trees, while Barnaby rested and dreamed. He was completely safe, completely warm, and completely at peace in his little loft under the tiled roof. The warmth of the quilt was a shield against the storm, and the soft ticking of the clock was a promise of tomorrow, but for now, there was only the peace of sleep. The gentle rain on the rooftop pattered on, a soft and steady lullaby that ushered in the quietest hours of the morning. In the darkness,